What's happening, folks? Back with another reaction, back with some trance, and this is one I would put somewhere in the hybrid zone between hard trance and melodic trance. It's definitely post-2000 trance, though it's made by a 90s trance legend. And yeah, we're going to listen to a tune by K90, Mark Doggett, although the very earliest K90 releases were with another guy named Chris, but I think he left the K90 project shortly thereafter and it became a Mark solo project. And yeah, Mark, his work as K90 is most notable for a number of releases he put out in the 90s, and he continues to produce, I think, into the modern day. I think his most recent digital release is 2022, so certainly not that long ago, but I think his last vinyl release was 2005. Now again, he was on multiple labels during the 90s, and then in the first half of the 2000s, it seems like most of the records he released then were on his own label, Datalist. That's a label that he founded. And yeah, this is definitely a track where you can tell it's different sounding than 90s trance. It is, again, somewhere between hard trance and melodic trance in that it has a very wicked, mechanical, almost like industrial and metallic sounding percussive arrangement, but it does also have a very epic, melodic breakdown and release in the middle of the track. And yes, it just, again, if you listen to this track from 2005 next to a tune from K90 from like 96 or 97, you can tell the difference in multiple ways. But it's interesting to me. We're going to listen to K90's original version of Super Space is the name of the track. But on the other side, there's a Simon Eve mix. And Simon Eve, his real name is Stefano, or Steven, and he came from Italy, and he's the guy who, with Pablo Gargano, set up Eve Records to showcase Pablo's material once Pablo moved from Northern Ireland. Pablo originally came from Italy, went to Northern Ireland, started his first releases there, I forget the label, then he moved to London, put out a couple records on Rabbit City, and then with his friend Stefano, or Steven, started Eve Records, and by that point I think Stefano was going by the name Simon Eve. So I never knew back in the day when I first started getting Pablo's material and I was first hearing all of these legendary tracks on Eve Records that Simon Eve produced himself. I thought he was basically like a label boss and so on, which he was, and he was also, I think, the man behind both React and Recover Records, but apparently he dabbled in production himself, and there is a remix from him on this record, which at some point I will react to, but I want to react to the K90 original mix first because that's the one that I used in sets. I can't really say back in the day, because again, this is from 05, and I don't think I got it until a few years after that on Discogs, maybe like 09, 2010, which was for me the time when I was returning to DJing with a vengeance, which I've told the story before, but I started mixing 98, played parties from 99 to like 03, and then for the next few years after that, I didn't stop mixing, but I was into punk rock and I had started to get serious about college and so on, and so I just didn't have as much time committed to DJing as I had before that. But by the time you get to 09, for whatever reason, I just refocused on it and dove back into buying records and mixing with aplomb and have never looked back since. So in any case, as I said, this is a hard trance tune from 2005 called Super Space by legendary trance producer K90 on his own label Datalist. And for anyone who knows his old school releases from the 90s, you will hear a difference here, but I think this is an excellent example of post-2000 hard/melodic trance. And no, that is not the full kick drum yet. But opening sections like this are nice for DJs, because you can start seeding a track, slowly working your way into it, and then right at a measure break, when the real kick drum comes in, you can switch, meaning kill the kick drum or at least most of the bass in the outgoing track, and let the new kick drum in the incoming track take over. Feels like we're in an industrial trance factory. I do love that gurgling, somewhat acidic, rising motif, whatever that was. Tonal shifts of the bass up and down, so good. she saw, but she saw something. But yeah, I love it. It's great. Again, you can tell it's a more evolved trance than a lot of the 90s acid and hard trance that I mix, meaning just something about the sonic ingredients, the kick drum, the melody, which I love how the melody, it's very like rolling, like it feels like a wave of melody where it's not like note, 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 like it just has this real full, and it's like parts of it are overlapping other parts of it. It just has a very wave-like structure. I do love though that like the first couple minutes, it's almost like techno, like industrial techno. Again, there's that rattling metallic sound, that rising acid snarl. There's like a ride cymbal that sounds like it could be, warehouse techno. So eventually we get more trance stylings, and I do enjoy that brief interlude, like after you get to the first major breakdown, and then there's like these keyboard, almost like organ style chords, and this break beat, and it feels like, oh wow, this is a real transition. Then even that hollows out, and that's when the wave-like melody comes in. First very soft, and then gets louder and louder. But yeah, again, I would say maybe like tech-trance, which is not a term we really used pre-2000, maybe the very late 90s, but yeah, eventually a style of trance that had a lot of techno stylings would emerge or synthesize, or at least, people put a label on certain tracks, and tech trance became a thing. So maybe I wouldn't have used that word back in 2005, but I think it applies. I think there's aspects of this which are undeniably hard trancey, though again with melody, and then there's aspects of it, ingredients of it that could very well work in a techno track, in sort of a warehouse techno kind of set. So tech trance, hard trance with melody, melodic trance with some industrial stylings, all these labels, all these descriptions I think work. Now again, I'm a huge fan of Mark's work going back to the classic K90s tracks, and I think this is the only one I have post 2000 on his Dataless records, but there's a couple others. There's a cool tune he did called Ghost in the Machine, which I think that might have been on his last vinyl release, and then I think he disappeared for a little while, and then you get to the 2010s and he put out digital releases, like digital singles, and again, those, there's like over a dozen, maybe 15 or so, leading up to 2022. At least on Discogs, I didn't see anything more recent than 2022, so maybe he's on a hiatus again, but either way, a long-serving member of the trance community, a big favorite among those of us who followed hard trance in the 90s, and indeed, a lot of his 90s stuff is like really fast. I don't remember in this moment if I reacted to his Species track, which is classic, like very fast 90s acid-drenched hard trance. And if I haven't reacted to that, then I'll do it soon. I know it's been in at least one or two of my acid trance sessions mixes, which, I have a video mix series here on YouTube called Acid Trance Sessions, and I think I'm up to like volume 18. To be fair, I know I've used it in some of my like what I call like SoundCloud mixes here on YouTube, meaning mixes that were originally on my SoundCloud that I've since made into a video with like a thumbnail and then put up on YouTube. But basically, K90's Species is a great tune. It's in several of my mixes here on YouTube, and if I haven't reacted to it yet, then I will do so soon. In fact, why don't I just check, now that Luca is calm, we shall see if I have, because if I haven't, then that is a necessity. Nope, I have not, because there are 0 videos out of the 8,000 or so I've done here on YouTube that include the word Species. Well, there you go. That'll be my next K90 reaction, maybe even my next hard trance reaction, so we'll look forward to that. As I said, there's a Simon Eve mix of Super Space on this same record, and although I think it's maybe a half step down from the original K90 version, it's still very good, and definitely I'll react to that one too. So shout out to K90, shout out to Simon Eve, shout out to post-2000 vinyl, which is to say, in the very early 2000s, vinyl was still king, and then by the mid-2000s, a lot of labels, even like entire genres, started to go digital only, which I get it. It was, we have CDJs, and, pretty soon there were other technologies that allowed for mixing in digital form, and I got nothing against that, but, I'm an old music collector, and I enjoy vinyl records, and the fact that now there are still labels that put out trance on vinyl makes me very happy. In any case, shout out to all those involved. Let me know what you think of this, and I will see you next time. Peace.